Welcome to the very end of chapter 2. This is your last video for it. So in this one, we're going to continue graphing inequalities, but this time we're going to be graphing absolute value inequalities. So basically the first step you always have to make sure you do, make sure the y is by itself, okay? That's the only way that this is going to work is if y is by itself. Boundary line will be a V instead, but use appropriate dashed lines versus solid lines. For the shading of it, I want you to start at the vertex and then shade up or down as necessary. Okay, and again, I'll get into what all that means in just a moment when we dive into our actual examples. So after yesterday, you should be comfortable with the idea of shading up and down and solid versus dashed, okay? So the only thing to remember now is now it's been a couple days since we've graphed absolute values. So let's make sure we remember. So recall this is going to cause us to shift right 2, down 5. Okay, so remember the first step is find the vertex. Okay. Second step is use the slope. Well, here the slope is 1, so we're going to be going up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, so on and so forth. But remember, we're going to be getting our V shape. So I also do it in the exact opposite. So again, we just did this in 2.7 if you need any refreshers, but otherwise, hopefully, this is still pretty fresh in our minds about how to graph these. All right, now, after looking at that, now we need to look at the inequality here. So first off, I see less than or equal to. That or equal to piece is going to make this a solid line. Okay? So that's what or equal to is doing for us. Now notice it's less than. Okay, so here less than. I'm going to start at my vertex. Okay, so here's my vertex. I'm going to start there. Less than is going to be down there. So all the shading that I'm doing is everything outside of the V. Okay, so that's the little bit difference is instead of just up or down, you're really thinking inside the V or outside the V. Okay, and you do that by interpreting it at the vertex. Okay, that's going to be the simplest way to go about doing this. So let's do another example. First, find the vertex. So that is left 3, up 1. So left 3, up 1. There's my vertex. Now use the slope to graph it. Slope of 2, so up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, so on and so forth. Now I need a V shape. So remember, you do the exact opposite on that side. And now I interpret my inequality. This is strictly greater than. So I'm going to make dashed lines. Okay, again, because it is strictly greater than. Greater than means start at your vertex. Greater means up. So this time I'm shading within the V. Okay, so again, those are the two main things. You can either shade inside the V or outside the V, but you always, always want to use the vertex in determining that. So let's continue. Well, what if is not solved for y? Okay, kind of a scary idea, right? But if it's not solved for y, remember that was the very first step of our stuff, okay? I can easily get this solved for y, right? I can just add that 4 over, which when I add it over, it stays separate from everything else. And now I have something that I'm fully capable of graphing. So don't be afraid if there's examples where y isn't by itself, just get it by itself, and then you can graph what's left. So now vertex is being shifted right 1, up 4, right there. So remember, always find the vertex. Now use the slope to graph your v. Slope of 2 means up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, so on and so forth. Also remember, you have to do that in the exact opposite way too. Okay, that's how you get your V shape. And now I'm going to interpret that. I see greater than or equal to. The or equal to piece tells me this is going to be solid lines. And greater than means start at my vertex. I'm thinking upward. So I'm going to be shading inside here. All right, and this next one. So again, the goal, getting y by itself. I need y alone. So I'm going to subtract that 1. Okay, and whenever you add or subtract, you have to do it outside the absolute value. Just tacks on to the end. Does not get incorporated inside. And then divide by -1 to get the y by itself. So this will take on a negative. Again, on the outside, you can't do anything to the inside of the absolute value. And then that. Now remember inequalities. If you divide by a negative, remember it flips the direction of your inequality as well. Okay, so don't forget to also do that, to flip its direction if you ever divide by a negative. So now that we have that, now let's interpret this. So that's left 2, down 1. So left 2, down 1 will put me right there. And now this is like having a -1 slope. So remember, this is where now I'm going to be pointing downward from that vertex. Okay, that's what a -1 slope looks like. Reverse it for the other side. And now I look at my inequality sign itself. So my inequality sign itself, strictly greater than. So that means I'm going to be dashing my line. And greater than means looking at my vertex. Greater than is up. So I'm going to shade everything outside of the V. And that is what it's going to end up looking like. Okay, so again, basically no harder than yesterday. Just really making sure we understand that you cannot, that you can't graph these as lines. You have to make sure when to use your V. Now, that leads into a great side note. Don't get too excited to start graphing V's everywhere, okay? That's something I've noticed my kids doing in the past. So I need you to be very cognizant of the fact that V's are only absolute values, okay? V's only absolute values, okay? That's it. Don't forget, some things really are straight lines. For example, this is not an absolute value, so it is just a straight line. Okay, you need to remember that. That's a big thing I see my kids doing. You get way too excited to graph everything as a V after learning this. You forget when to use a straight line. So here, when it's not absolute value, it really is just a straight line that you've been graphing for years now. Okay. So to graph just a linear function, just a straight line, remember, you still need y by itself. So add that 2x over, divide by 3, and now you can graph this just like we were doing yesterday, okay? So start up at your y-intercept, slope of 2/3, up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3, so on and so forth. Look at your inequality, strictly less than. So you get that. And then less than means shade underneath. All right. And again, just be careful, okay? Right away note whether you're graphing an absolute value or a straight line, okay? So last concept before I set you guys free. Last concept is if I give you a picture, you should be able to tell me if it is an absolute or you should be able to tell me the equation, okay? Sorry about that. So we did this back in 2.7 also. Now just an added bit of having it be an inequality. First things first, vertex. So the vertex here is 3, -2, and your slope is just 1, up 1 over 1. So there's no vertical stretching. It's literally just the vertex. Right 3, down 2, and I see a dashed line, so just greater than or less than, and I see shading upward, so it's going to be strictly greater than, okay? Again, I know that's the dashed line and because it's shaded up. Now let's look at this one. Again, let's identify the vertex. Now here the vertex is a little bit harder to read because notice it's counting by 2's, which is a little weird. Okay, so going up and being halfway there and going back there, that's actually a -4 and a +3 because you're counting by 2's. Okay, so I know that one's a little bit harder, but still doable. Okay, so taking a look at this one. So here, your vertex, left 4, up 3, and now let's take a look at our slope, okay? So our slope looks like to me, here I'm going down 1 over 1 to get to that point right there, okay? So this one, again, I know it's a little bit harder to see, but even though you're not right on the lines, you can tell that when you went down 1, you also still went over 1. So there's still no vertical stretch. It's simply the inequality itself, but notice it's upside down. So because it's upside down, it takes that negative, okay? X-axis reflection. So all my shading is above, and I have a dashed line. So I'm going to leave it just like that. All right, so a lot of good stuff today. Okay, so look down to the bottom. And again, as always, please write that summary for me. And then come back ready to do your final worksheet for Chapter 2.